Is this your program still?
There we go. We're live.
All right. Hey, everybody.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Robinson, and I'm here with Michael Judd, a good old friend in this beautiful home that has been complete. How long has it been complete? A few years?
Five
5 years.
years.
5 years complete, 5 years building it.
Hallelujah. Yes. We're
And
even.
yeah. And I hope I can explain, or maybe you can like tune in and feel how amazing it is to be in this space. Whenever I come here, I feel like a lot more peaceful and connected, and it just reminds me of all of the times being here and all the people who've touched this home and this land. And so it's really nice to be here. It's really good to be with you, Michael, and take some time to kind of reflect on this beautiful process and share it
Yeah.
with others.
Yeah. No, thanks
Yeah.
for creating the space for this and for literally helping to build this house. And I'm always eager to share the story of the house, the inspiration of the house, and to let it be an inspiration. So yeah, always happy to share.
Yeah. And I'll introduce Michael a bit. Michael Judd is a permaculture designer. He is an author, a speaker. He has created a lot of really amazing things here in Frederick, Maryland, this homestead, Long Creek Homestead, which, it has this home, but it also has this many acres of forest and food forest and gardens. And he holds events and workshops here and festivals like the Pawpaw Fest. And he does a lot of really great work out there, bringing perennial food systems to, I guess, into our culture and into our landscapes. And so I have to say that you have been one of the most inspiring people in my life. And so when we met 10 years ago, I was thinking of this earlier, like you were one of those people to me that was like a drop that sends many ripples out into my life for many years to come. I met a lot of people through you. I learned a lot from you. And so it's cool to, I guess, tap into all that inspiration and share it with others.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's also been a blessing for our lives to come together. And you've supported so many of our projects. And the first time we met you, you just jumped right in. You're like, yeah, let me help you with this. Let me help you with that. And all your talents, they're endless. It's fascinating to watch. It's like there's no end to what you can do and how well you do it and the strength you bring to everything. So I'm grateful to have an opportunity to give back a small thing and support your journey and your work with opening minds and hearts. I love what you're doing.
Thanks, Michael. Love you.
Yeah.
So I thought the best place to start would be like, where did this vision come from for this home?
Oh, so I lived in rural Latin America for 20 years and lived with indigenous peoples and just rural cultures and really learned how to build with what was available, learned how to grow with what was available. There were no stores. So there was just really the raw materials, earth, rock, thatch, adobe, all of these different materials, things that we could make. And I just learned by working side by side, first with some of the last of the Mayans down in Chiapas, in the Lacandon jungle, building compost toilets, literally, and fashioning them out of the jungle, which, at first sight just looked like a wild, ecosystem. But as I lived and, worked in that jungle, realized how intimately managed it was, how intimately interacted it was with the human species, how all the species were sort of co-evolving. And that changed my life, because then it wasn't a philosophy about, how us as humans can live in a regenerative way. I was actually experiencing it. Yeah. And that galvanized my life and my path to really just seeking, how to sort of share that experience and that possibility wherever I, would be, which ended up being a good 12 years in Nicaragua, where I started a couple permaculture-based nonprofits focused on food security, perennial fruit, nut, medicinal, bamboos, all the amazing species that we could gather. And then mixed into that was a more natural building, working a lot with thatch and roundwood timber framing, starting to work a lot with stone because we lived on a volcano, so there was lots of rock. And then getting creative. And I've always been drawn to circular, octagonal, and started building, these different circular, structures, for our permaculture courses. And then finally my own 8-sided structure to live in. And the energy of living in them is very, very real. There's something about the circular nature when you're in it that really affects even your psychology. Because there's really no corners, there's nowhere for your mind to get stuck. So there is actually this smooth, even your mind sort of rolling over your environment and not getting stuck. There's something to that. And then there's just the beauty of really kind of seeing, almost 360 degrees in a way. And then so there's that aspect of the actual shape, geometry, but then there's the materials. So after living years in structures that were just wood and stone and earthen floor and like terracotta, earth-shaped tile, you just feel it. You're actually in this sort of almost this living energy organism that is very much alive. So after I experienced that, it was like, well, of course, that's what I want to keep striving toward.
Right.
And when I came back to living here in America, North America, in the mid-Atlantic, in kind of a high populous area, with a temperate zone, so cold weather changes everything when it comes to building. Building in the tropics is totally different than building in the temperate. And the temperate's a different game. It's a much bigger game. In the sense of how we need to design for staying warm, mainly is the big difference is for heat. And so I had inspiration to build in the round already, but then during one of my crossroads of traveling between Latin America and coming home to the States and Europe and Africa and all these different places I was traveling throughout my couple of decades, I ended up at Earth Haven Eco Community. It's a permaculturally designed community in North Carolina outside of Black Mountain, near Asheville. And I was drawn there because I didn't know anything about permaculture. I'd already been living with indigenous peoples, and I'd already been living a lot of these principles and experiences. But they were, I met someone on my journeys that said they were building a 13-sided like Mayan designed council house as the center of this community. So I was like, I had a VW bug at the time, I piled all my life in there, and I drove down there, and I arrived like on a Saturday, and they were having like a community day of building this strawbale, earthen structure, living roof, 13-sided round wood timber framed, amazing council house, and just fell in love with learning about all of those. And at the same time, I landed myself in in early stages of a completely permaculturally designed extensive community, 300 plus acres, it's for like 100 and some people to live on. So it was like literally the permaculture manual coming to life all around me, micro hydro, forestry co-ops being formed, alternative currencies, just the cultural and community aspects of it all. Everything was just coming alive around me, and it was perfect. I was meant to be there. And it really sort of rooted more of my life and culture into what I was learning about indigenous ways. It was kind of like permaculture is this sort of this adapted modern, version of previous knowledge and, existence of many cultures. But really realistic to, our realities now of economies and material availability and, just our culture, what it is now. So that council house was the sort of the final inspiration for the design of this house.
Right.
And this house is patterned after
Mm-hmm.
that council house. So I went back and visited 10 years ago or so now. I went back and was visiting Earth Haven and some of the main builders for it, and taking pictures and taking notes and getting all kinds of information gathered. And then I came back and I teamed up with a natural builder architect named Siggy Coco,
Yeah.
who's really well known, and rightly so, for combining natural building and architecture, being an architect that then also knows natural building. She and I were able to bring the design, pattern into detail for our home, for what we wanted it to be, what size, all these different aspects and realities. So she really helped sort of, hone it down, and created, really good drawing plans that also got engineered stamped. So that was important.
Right.
A structural engineer stamped her drawings. Then we took that to the zoning.
Right.
That were the important steps to take.
Yeah.
Because the zoning seemed, really to want to make sure that, that there was somebody else was liable, basically.
Yeah.
So, getting an engineered, structured stamp means a lot, so you could maybe, if you can get that done, if someone can agree to do that, I think you can go a lot further with your process with zoning. That was one of the lessons learned. But, I spent a pretty penny on getting those plans made and getting all that done, but it made a difference.
Yeah.
It made a quality difference in the detail of our house. And I wanted to go the extra mile. I wanted to do it beautifully so that it could be an inspiration to others in this region, people who are building houses, people that, that have income, and, show them that this is not a hippie shack in the woods, that this can actually be something beautiful, elegant, comfortable, modern. So we really went the extra mile with that in mind as well. I mean, I'm happy to be living in it.
Yeah.
But it took a lot to do that extra bit. And I don't necessarily, recommend that after having done it. I'm glad to be in it and living in this structure, which we're going to give a tour, and we're going to show you more of the beauty of this place. But, in hindsight, I may not have tried to do so much. At the same time of life that we had a child, our first child was born.
Yeah.
I was getting my edible ecological landscape business cranking. My father passed during the process. Didn't see that coming, but still, all of these huge life events were happening at the same time. So it was a powerful experience for me, very challenging in many ways. But I'll stop there and see where to pick up.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all of that. There were so many points along the process where this is so outside the norm that that was a lot of those little roadblocks. I remember like the electricians, I remember the greywater, I remember all these little things that were like, we had to go somehow convince them that this is okay, or like with the well, that was another one too, right? So there were a lot of things like that, or not having a septic system. That was the thing.
There was quite a few things, and it was interesting. But like many things I do, I have vision, and I have, I believe in it, and I can see it already existing.
Right.
So I don't fall into, so many traps of fear,
or
listen to other people, because when you talk to other people about new concepts, generally speaking, they come up with a limitation. Like their mind comes to like, oh, well, you couldn't do this or that. And interestingly enough, when I first started, sort of talking around to see about architects to help me draft this, or, who can I get to help me get this thing started, on a more professional level. And almost everybody I talked to said, oh, I wouldn't try and do that on your own.
Yeah.
I would get a professional to do it.
To manage
I
a
swear, like
project.
95% of the time, whether it was, digging our foundation or I mean, anything, it was always like, you should get a professional to do that as like a default.
Right.
And fortunately, I had, courage and belief in this
Right.
stuff. And I just kept thinking, no, man, no, there's a way, there's a way, there's a way, there's a
Yeah.
way. And yeah, we built this house. We did have talented help in many aspects of building the house, but overall, I was the contractor.
Yeah.
I was the one that really made this house come together.
Right.
And I was not a professional. And I did a great job.
You did.
Yeah.
You did do a
So
good job.
I just put that out there because you will find that people will say, "Oh, I wouldn't try to do that," because that's where their mindset is.
Right.
It's similar with anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things that I was curious about is just from having the vision to do this. What did it take to fully embrace it, and then to walk the path through the challenges to completion?
Well, I guess there was many. My father, who was an engineer, loved the idea and was supportive. And a lot of times when I was down in Nicaragua in the early years, he would be helping get like soil samples done because on the map, we live in an Appalachian holler. It's sort of a low zone. There's a creek that runs right nearby us. It's kind of low and wet. And when you looked at the county maps, it kind of just had a big blue blob, and it's like no build zone. But so what we did is we got a private soil sample outfit come out and take core samples and say, actually, the soils here are different. And we were able to, first step, show that there actually is a place here that we could build.
Yeah.
So that was another thing where if we didn't just stopped at face value, we wouldn't have ever built here. So my father was helpful in that. And even those early stages, his heart and belief in it was also a big part of why this house exists.
Yeah.
So I don't want to overlook that.
Yeah.
And then, as the first the stages of getting the design together, Hurricane Sandy hit. And we have 25 acres of woodland that we steward and live on here and with, I should say. And Hurricane Sandy, just wind fell, a whole bunch of very beautiful straight poplars. And so it was literally right when we were designing, and it was a windfall to start us. And we went out and harvested those trees, stacked them, covered them. This was years before we actually started to use them. Yeah. But I think that was also somewhat of a catalyst, It's like, well, boom, here's one of the more challenging things to start with is your material. So, the universe provided that. And so that was the first thing. And then the design, but again, Sigi Coco helped a lot with not only design, but sort of educating about, doing things to quality. So I'd done earthen floors, and I'd built cob ovens, and I'd built, these different structures of stone and cob and thatch and wattle and daub, and I'd done adobe, I'd done, amateur level natural building. But this was kind of like, okay, well, let's take this to the next level. And Sigi also brought in a lot of that detail. We did workshops with her. So, I was also learning and gaining more professional skills as a natural builder. And maybe this is a good time to point out there's a difference between green building and natural building.
Yeah.
Right. So natural building is literally working with natural materials of the earth, the wood, the clay, the straw, the sand, the plants on the roof, the lime plaster, the stone. Our house is literally, made of all natural materials, very few, fabricated parts in it. Whereas green building is largely fabricated parts using usually plant-based materials, but a lot of entropy, a lot of energy put into them. So there's still a step a step forward from conventional building materials, which have no, typically, no consciousness for where they come
Right.
from. But I still find, I mean, green building is what's oftentimes most appropriate. So I won't say it's not up to the same standards, but for me, natural building is what I like to focus on and live in, and very much what this house is.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to just highlight the I guess how you co-create with nature and with this land, because as you prepared to build this home, you had to be mindful of where to put it, what direction to put it in to have the best passive solar design. And like you said, Hurricane Sandy hit and pulled down a lot of trees, and so it's like in the process you were harvesting the materials, the beams and the columns to build the house. You were using a bunch of old stuff that fell and the excavating that we were doing around the house to build hugelkultur beds off to the side, and planting on the side. So it was like this, over those 5 years, the land was forming around the house. We were observing what was working and what wasn't working and making changes, like for instance, like with the drainage, it was like observing what was going on with the house and working with the land to have it all evolve over time together.
So very holistic. And I think that's also something that's not always thought about, even with natural building or green building, is how do you take in the entire environment where it is. We tend to isolate specialty things, build a house, or you garden, or, you specialize in all these things instead of necessarily saying, well, how do we weave all these together?
Right.
I mean, that's permaculture in a nutshell right there. How do we weave the elements, all the present elements together as ecosystems do? We're basically creating, these ecosystems that are habitat for our species, and then ideally lots of others coexisting. So a lot of it was intuitive, which is the way I work, in design anyway, but observing and feeling the site.
Right.
And siting the house. I remember I sited it by myself. There was nobody, and I still remember being out here just, and it worked out beautifully. So I have to say it was intuition, because I don't really think I had all the concepts in mind when I was siting it. Right. It's fortunate that it is positioned the way it is. So there was that. And then, it was, disturbance, wanting to minimize disturbance on the site. Making our driveway in is minimal disturbance as possible, keeping it on contour, thinking about how it affects water and how to use it to actually start to help slow and harvest water into the landscape. Your driveway on contour is great, important thing to consider. And then, the water flows across the property, coming toward the house site. How do we, if we are taking down some trees and woody material, how do we position that into, hugelkultur beds, these berms with wood covered in soil, the soil that's getting excavated? How do we think ahead and design those so that they work with the overall flow and help move water, away from the house and around the house? And then if we're concentrating it, then how do we capture and use that? And just, so it all flows together and actually creates less work for you down the road by doing things up front, the good, what I call like good bones, in the design. And then also the design for the house, the actual foundation is a rubble trench foundation. And a rubble trench foundation is basically packed gravel. So there's no concrete and there's no rebar in the ground. So concrete and rebar in the ground has already a set shelf life. It could just be 100 years.
While you're talking, I'm gonna put
this. That's the trench. And so we only excavated where we were going to put supports. So it kind of looked like this alien footprint, right? So it's packed gravel. 3 foot by 3 foot, basically 3 foot wide, 3 foot deep. And this is all coated, right? So, but then the base, the floor of that rubble trench foundation was slightly graded. So all the water that comes toward the house, both above ground and below ground, actually gets channeled out and guided down and out in front of the house. into our willow temple.
Right.
So that really protects the house. In natural building, we talk about good boots and a good hat on your structure to keep it dry and make it last. So there, that rubble trench, that stone foundation should be here for thousands of years. There's nothing to fail, right? So on top of that, we built a bond beam. So this is really the only concrete we used. And it was just 18 inches wide by 18 inches high. And that sat in the center of the gravel, right on the gravel. Right. And that was the toe up. That was the boots. And so that we could put our posts, on that, and then also our straw bales, so that everything was lifted off the ground. Yeah. Very important in that, and getting that lift. Right. And then from there, we started doing the roundwood timber framing, and we actually built the roof on the ground. There's another picture in here that shows that nicely.
That was an amazing process.
Yeah, and so we had to hand peel all the logs. We oiled them really nicely. Yeah.
This is the.
I'm gonna go up there. Yeah, there it is, the bottom right corner there. Yeah. So that's the center roof piece, and it's all roundwood to roundwood timber framing, which took forever, because there are not easy reference points on a round organic log.
Right.
And when you're doing joinery, you need to get it pretty dialed in to fit tightly. And on a squared hewn log, it's pretty easy to find those, and you can kind of timber frame things pretty quickly. Yeah. Roundwood, it was really hard to find, those reference points.
Yeah, that makes
sense.
But
I worked with an absolute ninja, woodsman, carpenter, Peter Bugler, Acorn Woodworks. Cannot say enough about him being an absolutely magical being of wood. Everything from being a woodsman to cutting, knowing how to work with trees, having sawmilling trees, to doing like insane exact carpentry and building. He's a really magical guy. Yeah. I was really his apprentice, if I even dare say so. Yeah. I was like his mule. I was just like everything, to help and work with him. But a lot of the beauty of the woodwork in the house is thanks to Peter. But the roundwood was very challenging and took a long time. I think it took, potentially 6 months to do that top roof, alone. But then all in one day, for the whole center room here, which is, 20 feet tall, by 28 feet in diameter, this main center room here. All of the vertical posts went up all in one day, and we got a crane for one day. Cranes are expensive, so it was like we got ready for that, and it came and it lifted the roof and it put it right on, and it fit beautifully. It was like, oh, thank you very much. But it took a lot of time and a lot of planning to do that. We spent a lot of time and a lot of money doing that as well. It is absolutely gorgeous. It makes a big difference in the way the house feels and looks, but you definitely pay for it. It then becomes more, or it starts to become a work of art. And it doesn't have to be that. You can do load-bearing straw bale. So if I was to do a simpler structure, which is what I would probably do if I was to do this again, I would do a load-bearing straw bale house, which means the walls actually hold the weight of the roof. And this is federally coded. It may vary county and state to state, but it's actually coded. It's legit. In Frederick County, where I lived, you can do it too. There's a great example of a load-bearing straw bale. You reduce your costs by doing this. Carpentry is typically what costs a lot of money and time. So by doing load-bearing, you're reducing a lot of your carpentry needs. The house that I know that was built load-bearing is probably about 1,500 square feet. Lovely structure. Has everything you would want. And they built it for less than $100,000. Yeah. They had helping hands, but they did some hiring too. Right. And it was like, wow, my life would have been different if I did it that way. Yeah. It would have been a lot quicker and easier, and it still would have been a nice structure to live in. So, I don't put it down, and I actually might steward most people in that direction, rather than going for this, unless you had, time and money. Right. and endurance to do this in a little bit of zaniness.
Yeah. So it seems like one of the barriers for some folks with straw bale is just like, oh, straw bales, they're gonna rot, they're gonna like get old, they're gonna get wet. And
Right.
do you want to talk a little bit about why straw bales work as
Yeah.
insulation for a home, and what you need to do to make sure that they stay in good shape for
Right.
the long term?
Great, great.
Yeah.
So, natural building is regionally specific.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't necessarily build a straw bale house in Hawaii, right? But in most continental, temperate, areas, where, I mean, most of North America, I might be a little, dubious about it in some of the more subtropical, very, 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 but even so, it's just, it would work. It's just maybe not the most appropriate for what's on offer naturally
Right.
around you. But straw bale is hands down for me the most appropriate and the best design. Certainly for the mid-Atlantic, and I think most northern parts. I think for
Mhm.
most areas,
Yeah.
I would seriously consider straw bale.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, yeah, there's a couple of articles and a couple of people out there that say, and of course, if you don't do things right, you totally could end up with, a
Mhm.
rotten house. But the first straw bale house that was ever built was built in Lincoln, Nebraska in the 1880s. And when they first built the first, whatever combine, that would actually make a square bale from straw,
Right.
which is, what's left over after grain, rice, and wheat and things. It's the straw, right? And
Right.
it's not hay, it's straw. And as soon as they created that machine, they built the first house, and
Mm.
it's still being lived in.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's the proof. The proof is in the living.
Yeah.
And there's many other, structures. There's even down in Georgia, which can be quite humid. I think there's a good 70-year-old straw bale house that's doing well.
Yeah.
So, and we live in a very humid climate too. And so far, great.
Yeah.
No issues.
Right.
But the important things are, yes, the straw needs to be harvested well, which means it has to be harvested during dry weather. It has to be, properly stored. It can't have any humidity touching it, so it can't be touching metal or be on like
Yeah.
a concrete floor. I mean,
Right.
it really has to be stored well, and so that it never gets moist.
Yeah.
From that early stage from being bound.
Right.
Right? Because if moisture gets caught in the center of a bale, it doesn't come out.
Mhm.
If you get moisture on the outside of a bale, it'll come out.
Right.
So care in making sure that your bales are dry the entire time is the key. And then, lifting them off the ground so that they're not going to get wet,
Right.
and make sure your roof is really good so there's no leaking into it. And that's
Yeah.
another example that happens out there is people don't do a good job doing straw bale, and they don't roof well typically, and water will come in and water will come down into the bales.
Yeah.
And if it gets in the middle of the bales, then they're
Right.
going to rot. But that's not the fault of the design,
Mhm.
of good straw bale building.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's people who maybe jump at the opportunity too quickly, or say, yes, I can do this as a contractor, or
Mhm.
or whatever. I mean, but it's not something, that you should use as a gauge
Yeah.
for valuing straw bale.
Right.
I love straw bale. I've done most every type of natural building on the planet.
Yeah.
And I love straw bale, and I wouldn't want to live in anything else, certainly in the temperate climate.
Yeah.
It keeps us warm in the winter, and it keeps us cool in the summer.
Right.
It's the fill for the wall. So when you build a house, a lot of material goes into the wall, whatever it is.
Mhm.
If it's a conventional house, it's 2x4s and insulation and drywall and blah, blah, blah. It's just a ton of material. It's a ton of footprint, a ton of cost. It's pretty much an ecological disaster in most cases. So it's like, well, how are we going to fill our walls? Straw bales. Those are your walls.
Yeah.
They become your wall as well as your insulation. And then they breathe.
Yeah.
So this house actually breathes slowly, but everything is able to kind of breathe in and out slowly. And that's important, that you never seal the bales. So
Mhm.
another failure, both adobe and straw bales, if someone comes and puts like a concrete stucco
Mhm.
on the outside, or vinyl or something that
Right.
traps moisture, then they're going to fail too. But
Right.
we use earthen plasters and lime plasters so that, any moisture, just kind of migrates through and out.
Right.
And actually the earthen plasters, especially help moderate humidity. So inside our house, we don't have air conditioning, we don't need it. And you walk in from the outside during the summertime, and it's cool and it's not sticky in here because the 2 to 3 inches of earthen plaster on the wall actually absorb, excess humidity and moderate it. So it's like this beautiful moderator of just the space. And then heating it is easily done with this masonry stove. This is a Finnish design, similar to the soapstone. Inside of here is refractory cement sort of core, and it's got one main chamber, and you only fill that chamber once for every 24 hours in the wintertime. So big armful of wood in there. You light it, you let it burn, and then you shut down the baffles, and you lock that air in there so that the heat comes through the flues here and then slowly emanates out slowly. And it just kind of gives this warmth that hugs you, and then just heats the whole house. And we have earthen floors and earthen plasters, so they kind of become a battery and they hold that heat. We get some passive morning sun coming in and hitting our earthen floor, and that adds heat to our house without
Right.
doing anything. And so the inputs to keep our house warm are very minimal, and that comes from good design.
Yeah.
It's like good landscape design. Good permaculture design sets things up so that they function largely for themselves. So yes, there was a lot of input to build the house, but now it's so easy. It hardly takes any maintenance. And heating and cooling are the two big things, energy inputs and costs for houses once they're built. And ours is just an armful of wood in the winter, and it's designed to be cool naturally. So it's not a lot of energy now, cost, and then it's also built-in security. The grid can go down.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter, and we don't even need photovoltaics. We don't need solar panels. We don't need any of that. We have what we need. We have a well, and we put a manual pump on the well, and then we got our wood. We got food stores. I mean, it's perfect. And I know not everyone can do this, but what I do recommend people, if they have the chance to do, is put some kind of masonry, and they do have retrofits for houses. It can be a smaller unit than this, but I would have your own source of being able to heat your home. And if you have well, I would get a manual well pump to put on that, so that those are the two main things in the temperate climate that you need to survive in the event of change. Right? You need to stay warm and you need water. And then the other things, come along after that.
Right.
So if you can, secure those things for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think we can't skip over talking about how many hands do you think touched this house?
Oh, man, so many hands. And that's part of the energy that's in this house. So we had workshops, and then we had just tons of volunteers. Nicole put lots of energy into this house. She did the whole entire earthen floor. I got pictures of her like weed whacking the bales to trim them.
I learned a lot of weird skills.
Yeah, a lot of weird skills. Nicole is here so much. So much of her is in this house, and all the other people that showed up and were just inspired, excited, and just so ready to help. And that energy is in the house. Building this house, we built community as well, big time. A lot of friendships that we still enjoy came from that. And it's touched a lot of lives that came and saw what we were doing and realized you can do this. And so that energy is definitely in the house. Apart from the actual materials that we feel in the house, the energy and all the people that participated in making it happen, that's all here. And I think that's kind of what makes it a home,
right?
Versus a house. Somebody else slapped together for you.
That's something that you got out of it by doing it yourself that you wouldn't have got if you had had someone else manage the project.
Not at all. Not at all. And that's in here. Like, we now live in that energy.
And it continues to build because you continue to have all kinds of gatherings here, and people who maybe haven't been here before, they become part. I think what I loved to watch over that time period and since then is just that it's like there are these periods of time where someone was very prominently involved, and then they kind of like maybe moved along and did something else, and then someone else came, and there was always like this revolving door of new people to help who wanted to be here, and just like getting to meet all of them and having all these people connect. I think that there's probably just like a much bigger ripple effect than we can even imagine from this house.
Huge. And it was very magical in the sense that, yes, as a need arised, a person or a couple souls would show up and they would be perfect for that. Right. It was weird. It was great.
Yeah.
And it just kept happening.
Right.
And then, yes, I've seen a lot of those lives change. I've seen those individuals. Some of them actually are doing natural building in other parts of the world. Some really fell in love with plastering, are now doing plastering. They saw also us as a young family,
right.
Living this way. And I think that inspired them and encouraged them to be like, yeah, why not? We're alternative as well. And, we can make it work.
Yeah.
These guys are making it work.
Yeah.
So I think that inspired a lot too. Big ripples.
Yeah.
Big ripples.
And honestly, I think part of that is too, just you guys were just like did it your way and you were yourselves. And sometimes it was like kind of like messy and like it wasn't perfect. And we went with the flow, and the people who were involved went with the flow. And I think that's part of what helps people think that they can do it too.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It was very, very organic.
Yeah.
And low budget and very hands-ons and very community. And it took us a long time. So, it was mixed up with life and work and everything. So it took us 4 years to actually build the entire house. Yeah. And that's because of the detail. I think if we did a load-bearing rectangle structure, we could have pulled it off under 2 years, even with work and life and everything. Right. And I think, if you had total focus that, a year to 18 months on a simple design,
right.
or potentially less, there's actually good plans out there now, architectural plans that you can buy. So you can go online and find, the square footage and the layout you like. And they'll have the engineered plans and the costs and everything kind of pre-done for you. And I think that's great in many ways, to simplify, the process, the cost, and then also have a lot of the information built around it in those plans and whatever that person is offering you with that package. I think is worth looking into.
Yeah,
and give you cost ideas up front, because man, this house, it cost 3 times as much as I thought, and it took 3 times as long because it was the first. It's totally. There's not plans on the internet out there for this one.
Well, it's beautiful that more solutions and options are coming through for people with different needs and backgrounds and skill sets.
Yeah, I guess I should throw in there, because people always ask, what was it challenging to put this through permitting and zoning? And no, it was not.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. This is not the first strawbale in our county. So I'm grateful to those pioneers that did that. And then getting the good stamp drawings. This house is really overbuilt, which is great. It's the way I like to build.
Yeah.
But I think they saw that in zoning, and it was outside of their categories. So when they have their categories to check off, they'd come out here and they'd be like, no, this isn't the categories. But they would make sure that certain things were being met. And then the electrician and the plumber and all that would sign off. So actually I had no problems. It was very supported. I think the zoning and the permitting, they were all very interested in what I was doing, what we were doing. And then I was fortunate enough for getting a compost toilet and a greywater system put in. The individual at the health department responsible for that was really supportive.
Right.
So that was great. And we still had to do legwork by going and presenting to the plumbing board, because nobody had really, within the current administration of the plumbing board, had ever had anybody ask them to put a compost toilet, in their house, a new structure, maybe existing structure. So, that worked out gratefully. And all of the water in our house, so we have a sink, we have, we do have a washing machine, and we have a shower tub. all of that is gravity fed. So it just goes by gravity down to the lowest drain, which is our tub. And then it gravity feeds out through a pipe into a greywater bed, which is basically just a shallow trough with 2 growing beds on either side that absorb all of the water that comes out of our house, goes and helps grow our pawpaw trees and our black currants. And, it's out there working on flourishing our landscape. And there's no pumps. There's no mechanical anything. It's all just gravity fed, which I love. I like their not needing to have extra parts. And if exterior energy systems go down, this whole thing just works no matter what.
Yeah.
And it was simple and it was cheaper to do.
Right.
So it's like, duh.
Yeah.
And then a compost toilet we put in. And we kind of did a smaller compost toilet because we don't have a basement or anything where you could put a taller unit, which means that I have to manage that toilet more often, but I don't mind. But you could come up with a different design where you don't have to interact with your compost toilet because people don't want to. Right. So that saved us a ton of money. Yeah. We had to delineate a septic area, but we didn't have to develop or do anything with it.
Right. So I remember now that.
Big money savings. So.
Yeah, it's important to point out that usually in our modern culture, the water from our toilets, our black water and our gray water from our sinks and everything get combined into one system. And it's like, just really a shame. It's really a shame.
It's a waste
because all of pollution. All this gray water that could go into the landscape that might just have some like soaps and if you use like natural soaps and stuff, that's not gonna cause problems. All can just go into the landscape, but things that have human waste in them need to be processed a different way. But adding all of that to water just creates a huge mess.
Yeah, I know, and it's a loss of that fertility because human manure is actually a wonderful, very nutrient-rich, great compost. It really is a gift back to the earth if we use it that way. And unfortunately, we're not even giving it back. We keep like cheating the earth out of our bodies at the end of life. We cheating them out of our the things that we can actually very easily give back in a direct way. We're whatever. But anyway, let's just say I've heard that you can retrofit houses for gray water. So there's a lot of ways to take the water out of your house. I'm not saying it's legal, but there are ways that you can recycle your own water and be creative with recycling those resources.
Some people just redirect their washing machine, just one thing to start with.
Just go out there and do like a rain garden. Anyway.
What do you think about doing a tour?
Let's show them.
So I was thinking I'm gonna have you hold this and I'm just gonna have to unplug a couple things here real quick. Alright, and I'm gonna turn this around. And I thought we'd start in this beautiful main room. So I'm gonna do a little shot, just try to capture the space. There's the one door where you come in. Scanning up, we have this loft upper area.
The loft is all made out of cherry wood and ceiling's all poplar. All that wood was sawmilled on site. All the wood in the house is from the land. Even the trim and the vanity and our bed, all the wood.
And so a lot of it's poplar, but this is a nice cherry beam right here.
Yep, storm fallen again. That's how much cherry was storm fallen, enough to make the loft. The house is 1,250 square feet. That's with the loft. It's about 1,100 square feet, and then the loft, actually it's 1,350. The loft is 250. And then we got reclaimed windows and doors. Those big tall windows up there are actually sliding doors that we put in. We had one old ash tree on the property that had died, and that's what we built our window sills with and our seating benches. We've got these cool recycled wine sconces.
And there's the Willow Temple outside of the window. That was where you mentioned the greywater.
Yeah, living.
To
Yeah, well, that's actually where the rubble trench drains to, and then the greywater goes off to the side of the house for
there's
more.
Chulo.
There's old Cheeto.
And the masonry stove as we were sitting there and talking about it. So let's see.
We can check out the kitchen too. Yeah, check out this kitchen counter. So, we're trying to also be modern. And so a countertop, we use concrete here. So we're not total purists. But we did a pigment in it, and we put pea gravel in it, and then ground that down, and it sort of brought out the pea gravel in this cool blue.
That was done by Luke.
Yeah, that's right, Luke.
He was another, very talented person who had a lot of touches.
Yes. A lot of the windowsills, and actually the compost toilet, which we can go check out too. You guys want to see the toilet? Come check it out. It's one of the most exciting parts for me anyway. I built a lot of compost toilets. That was one of my starts in Latin America. This is Wyatt's room.
Wyatt's room and Wyatt's house.
Wyatt's house,
because he grew up here. I remember him in a diaper and playing with a hammer, and me being a little worried. He survived. Yeah. This is just like playroom for kids too. And this whole bathroom vanity is a cherry that also fell on the land. Beautiful piece of wood, and actually all of the wood is from the land. And in here's our compost toilet. Let's see if I can close this. Yeah, that's good.
Very zen place to be. Basically, it's a above ground unit. That's a big barrel in there. Here's our sawdust. So we got a sawdust bin. Basically, you give your donation, and then you put sawdust to help just create that balance of nitrogen, and then anything that doesn't compost, a little trash can there. And yeah, and actually this is old porch ceiling from my wife Ashley's farm where she grew up, an old 1800 home, beautiful farmhouse. So we do have a little bit of her heritage and family in here as well. Yeah. And Ashley really Ashley is what's made this house what it is now, as far as having style and character and not being a total mess. Is really, and then Ashley also did the mosaic down here in our sort of Roman bath style tub. We really went a little extra mile in the bathroom. I mean, this is a space of wellness, right? I mean, I got inspired actually for this tub design in New Mexico, the Llama Foundation. It's above Taos. Highly recommend anyone check out the Llama Foundation, even their website. They do a lot of natural building, and they're a cool community. And they have a beautiful bathhouse, much bigger, big tiled mosaic tub and hanging plants. And that was an inspiration, to create a space. And I don't like to be in a closed space when I take a shower. I'm used to showering, outside in tropics or somewhere. So this is kind of a mix of the two.
And how about that it's the lime plaster in here? Did you want to mention a little bit about when we used lime and when?
Yeah, so mostly the interior walls are all earthen plaster and the exterior lime, except for our bathroom wall where there's more water. And just this part right here is a lime plaster, and I need to get over that and do a final coat on it still. But otherwise, the lime plasters are all on the outside. And lime basically is just lime powder you turn into a putty. And then you ideally let it sit. We let ours sit for a couple of years, and then you mix that with sand and you reapply it, and it turns back into rock. It's like it becomes hard limestone again, but it breathes. So water can, moisture can always sort of migrate out if there's any in the bales or anything like that. So some people do straw bale houses, lime plaster inside and outside. I like the earthen plasters because they are softer. You do feel that difference. I think they balance humidity a little better. So I definitely like earthen plasters inside more than lime inside and outside. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, so the hot water for our house is a on-demand water heater, a little German, on-demand water heater this big. Again, when we were building the house, the plumbers were like, "Oh, that's not going to be enough for you and your family," and it totally has been. It's been great. We haven't struggled. I mean, there's only 4 of us at this point, but even so, it's just we've not like had cold showers and all these other things. It's been awesome. It's a Strawbale. And man, it's been 5 years and I haven't done anything to it. I haven't even changed any filters or anything. And it totally does a great job of heating our whole house. And that's a big energy difference. So often I'll talk about, people are like, "Oh, do you have solar panels and stuff?" And actually we don't. We don't have the best aspect for solar panels, but for me, it's more about how much energy you use versus the source of it, because you can have these big houses with solar panels that are and solar panels have footprints. I mean, they are ecological disasters in themselves. People aren't thinking about that or talking about that, right? So it's more about how much energy you use, because no matter where your energy comes from, there's going to be an impact. So for me, ideally, you're minimalizing that with your design so that you're heating very easily, ideally with wood or whatever's appropriate, around you. And then your hot water is a on-demand water heater or solar. You could do solar hot water, which I think is a pretty cool design too. And then our washing and dryer are these little European numbers. They're super energy efficient, and our refrigerator is like a smaller European design. Like the Europeans, man, they figured this stuff out a while ago. Anyway, come on in, the master suite. And yeah, this is our bedroom, which is a wonderful place to sleep and just be another place of wellness. And we built this bed from wood, from our land and from Ashley's family farm land. And a friend of ours built the bed. So, just lots of local energy and love in this whole house. Some cool old doors recycled out of Baltimore and DC, old homes, kind of funky.
And another big thing for the salvaging was a lot of that insulation that went under the floor and on the roof.
Right. Yeah. So insulation is still important to put on your roof or under your floor. There was areas where, straw bales weren't really going to work. But, most forms of insulation have a huge footprint, even if they're soy-based. But what we found out is there's actually a good used market for rigid insulation. So rigid insulation, I think some of the best insulation, has some of the best R value. It's rigid sheets, sometimes 4x8 sheets, 4 or 5 inches thick. And there's a big market for it because these big shipping containers, these refrigerated shipping containers, they take them apart and they either replace or they just decommission all of that insulation in there. And so I went, and of course I looked online, I asked people, "Can you reuse this?" And I was like, "Oh, not recommended, don't use it." And we totally used it under our floor and on our roof, and it's been great. And, it saved us money, but I think even more importantly is it did not put that demand on, the environment to use our insulation. So there's a ton of stuff, if you do the extra mile, that you can find, a thriving stream of reusable materials. All right, let's check out these stairs. I'm gonna walk up them.
People on Facebook are saying stunning.
They're
very inspired.
All right, good.
Let's go up the stairs.
So now these stairs are actually a code. So it's not just like a funky design. It shortens the run. So by meeting code, you have to have certain riser width and length, and this actually meets it without having to run a long staircase out. So Sigi came up with this somewhere, and it's been great. People dig it, and it's funky. Yeah, it's a sobriety test for sure. And then up here is just an extra loft space, tons of books. I got a great library of natural building, permaculture, plants. So this is an extra hangout space. Wyatt comes up here and plays with his Legos and whatever. In the wintertime, we come up here more often. It's a little bit warmer and, hang out. But so far, it hasn't actually been used a ton, but it's an extra overflow space, if it's ever needed. And I can get out onto the roof here. And we have a living roof out here. And so if I need to get out there and pull a weed or two, I can easily pop out through here. And the window structure is passive. It's called passive ventilation, where we have windows at different levels, at higher levels. So when you open a window or a door in the lower level, it brings in cool air, which then rises, as it heats, and it exits out. And that passive ventilation actually naturally cools the house. So we have these upper story windows, and then we have the cupola up here, which is open right now because we're in summer as well. And it can just pull that extra heat out so it's not sitting in here. So again, just kind of good design, just makes it easy and comfortable to live in.
I might see if I can peek out to the roof, get a shot of the roof from here, and maybe
yeah. Let's have a look here. This is here. Let's see if I can get this too.
Whoops! Don't mind me.
Whoops! There you go.
All right.
So the roof is there's sedums, succulent plants. It's a misnomer to think you're going to grow your garden on your roof or get your goats out there. Really, you want shallow rooted plants that aren't going to sort of dig into your liner or whatever is protecting your moisture. So shallow rooted plants, and roofs get hot. They're hot and they're dry and they're windy. So you want very drought tolerant, succulent like plants. Sedums, being a great choice. And we've got a dozen different types of sedums that we planted as mixed plugs up here. And another thing that's interesting about our house and our roof is that we didn't use a fabricated green roof medium, which usually is like perlite and vermiculite and these high energy intensive materials from far parts of the planet to create a growing medium in. We use straight up topsoil and leaf grow. Straight up municipal leaf compost, and we mixed it 50-50. Now, one of the reasons that also worked really well is we did have an underlaying fabric called Inca drain, and it's basically recycled plastic that's in these little plastic balls that water can move through. And anyway, we were able to put our soil on top of that, and then so any excess moisture in that soil is able to migrate out. Typically, the green roof mediums are designed so that water can move out of them. But this recycled Inca drain is really awesome, and it allows you to pretty much use straight up topsoil and compost. And our roof is one of the healthiest, most vibrant green roofs I've ever seen anywhere. And if you again talk to most people, they're going to say, "Oh no, you shouldn't just do that. You should get the engineered, highly, entropic." Medium to do it with. But again, we've had huge success just really keeping it simple and natural. Yeah. All right, I'm starting to lose my voice, all this yakking.
All this excitement.
Excitement and yakking. I'm pleased to share all of this,
Now, yeah, so shall we head back down? I'll let you lead the way.
Let's see if we can make it in one piece here. And then, for our Pawpaw Festival, we have an open house. So that's one of the benefits of coming to the Pawpaw Fest in September. September 18th this year, the third Saturday in September each year. And the Pawpaw fruit is the headliner, but everyone gets to kind of, check out the food forest, our mushroom growing, our gardens. We do tours, great music, pawpaw ice cream, but then we usually have an open house, or at least open it so people can walk around and look in it. And also when we do workshops and tours, we have opportunities where people can actually come and experience the house. But I'm always pleased to have a chance to share, in a wider audience.
Could you point out the window?
Oh yeah.
Truth window.
Truth window. So in most Strawbale homes, you have what's called a truth window. And basically that's because people are like, you say Strawbale, and they can't get their mind around that you actually have straw bales. We have over 550 straw bales in this house. So Again, so this is what you call a truth window, and you open it up, and then there, boom, you see it's literally straw bales. Over 500 of them, and then you can see how much work we've done to put clay over that in many layers. The first layer being very rough, mostly clay, and then doing different recipes as we built it out, more sand, smaller microfiber straw, chopped straw, to where our final plaster is very finely sifted soil, sifted sand, and then like really finely chopped straw to get a very nice smooth finish on it. And Ashley really wanted a lighter finish, a lighter color to the walls. And so we had to come up with a recipe to make it light. And one of the key ingredients in that is actually toilet paper. So, good old soft white Charmin toilet paper helped. And actually toilet paper has microfiber in it. So it really actually was quite a magical ingredient, because this is earthen plaster, but it's cream white, which really makes the house lighter and shows the wood up nice. So you can get really creative with this, and you can use pigments. You could put some really nice different colors in your home as well. The floor, the earthen floor here actually has a pigment in it. The main room floor here is kind of got a yellow ochre finish to it, whereas the floor and the rest of the house has the earth color, and you can see the straw and the earth element in it more. So, there's lots to play with, a lot of creativity. Here comes Wyatt, the whiz kid. You can come in, but be quiet, bro. Hey, we're finishing. You can come sit, but we're about done. We told everybody this was Wyatt's house because he was literally born into it being built. So what was norm for him was huge piles of sand and huge piles of soil and throwing mud on walls. And we've had to kind of let him know that's not, what he should always be doing. Sure you don't want to come say, hey, Wyatt, this is it. We're saying goodbye. All right.
This has been super fun.
Yeah.
Really fun. It helped remind me of like how much I learned from doing this here. I learned so much from doing this, from working on this house. And so thank you for facilitating that for a lot of people. And yourself too, for sticking through and making it to the end and staying inspired and staying committed to the vision. It's absolutely so worth it. It's so beautiful, and it's going to be standing here for a couple of 100 years at least.
Hope so, for what it took, I hope. And I just realized, that we lived here for 5 years. It took 5 years from design to living in. Now we've lived here 5 years, and that feels good to me. I'm like, because I was almost worried toward the end of building it that I was going to die and I was never going to get to actually live in it. And now it's like, oh, okay, at least 5 years. I've really got a lot out of this already. Yeah. But yes, and it could be here for hundreds of years if the roof is kept in good condition. And there's really no sun gets on it. What's up there shouldn't really degrade.
Right.
And this house could literally live for more than a couple hundred years.
Yeah, and just like any other house, it needs a little TLC to keep it rolling. But it's like it's like it's a beautiful interactive natural, little patch up a little plaster here or there, keep your plaster skills going.
That's right. Well, I told Wyatt, and soon he's going to inherit it.
Yeah.
I built it, and he's going to keep it up, pass it along.
Right. Yeah.
Has anybody bought the more?
Hang on a second.
Hold on, buddy. We're signing off here.
All right. Well, thanks, Michael, so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole, and thanks
to everyone who tunes in now or tunes in later. I hope you get inspiration from this.
Yeah, leave your comments. We'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.
Good night.